glad to announce that we are just about to open the conference Freemasonry in Southeast Europe from 19th to 21st centuries, which is the first scholarly conference with this topic, as far as I know, ever organized in Belgrade. And to cut the long story short, I will give the floor to the organizers, first to Professor Lukas Rasulić, Professor of the School of Medicine of the University of Belgrade, who is at the same time at this moment Grand Master of the regular Grand Lodge of Serbia, that celebrate the centenary of its existence this year. And then to our host, Dr. Miša Đurković, Director of the Institute for European Studies. So, Professor Rasulić, please.
Dobro jutro, dobrodošli u Srbiju, dobrodošli na prvi naučni skup o slobodnom zidarstvu u Jugoistocnoj Evropi u periodu od 19. do 21. veka. I will now continue to speak in English because this is an official English language of this conference. So, if you allow me, I prepare some words to tell you.
Please.
Dear colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen, I am very glad to be able to address you today in a double capacity as a professor of the University of Belgrade and as a Grand Master of regular Grand Lodge of Serbia. In the capacity of Professor of the School of Medicine of the University of Belgrade, I am very glad when international meetings and scholars are organized in Belgrade and generally in the region, especially when certain topics are covered for the first time. As a professor of neurosurgery, I have myself organized many meetings of scientists in that field for the first time in Serbia, and I am therefore fully aware how difficult it may be. In that sense, I would like to thank and congratulate the coordinators and co-organizators of this meeting, Professor Slobodan Marković, for his effort to organize this conference, and also to the Institute of European Studies and its director, Dr. Miša Đurković, for their decision to accept to host this conference. In the capacity of the Grand Master of the regular Grand Lodge of Serbia, I would like to express my great satisfaction that a meeting like this is organized in 2019, since that this year is year of the 100th anniversary of the Grand Lodge of Serbs, Croats and Slovenians, Jugoslavia. For this purpose, the regular Grand Lodge of Serbia has also supported the publication of a monograph written and edited by Professor Slobodan Marković. It has supported the organization of this conference and plans to support an exhibition dedicated to the anniversary as well. And I'm glad to mention that on June 21st, 2019, the anniversary of the Grand Lodge of Yugoslavia was marked in Belgrade with a special academy in the National Theatre of Serbia, and then on the occasion of the anniversary, a special guest of our Grand Lodge, His Royal Highness Duke of Kent, Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England. Our knowledge of the history of Serbian and Yugoslav Freemasonry is limited by the fact that a lot of archival materials and personal correspondence was destroyed in the turbulent century behind us. It has, however, become clear that no history of Grand Lodge in Southeast Europe could be properly written without taking into consideration materials preserved in the archives and of other Grand Lodges in the region, in Europe and in the United States. The history of Freemasonry in Serbia and Yugoslavia, for instance, is closely linked with other Grand Lodges, such as Grand Orient of Italy, the symbolic Grand Lodge of Hungary, the Grand Lodge of Hamburg, the Supreme Councils of Romania and Greece, the Supreme Council of Southern Jurisdiction in Washington, the Grand Orient of France, and the Grand Lodge of France, and last but not least, the United Grand Lodge of England. Therefore, it is obvious that diligent researchers of Serbian and Yugoslav Freemasonries would have to consult not only archives in Belgrade and ex-Yugoslavia, but also archives in Italy, Budapest, Vienna, Bucharest, Athens, Hamburg, Paris, London, Edinburgh, New York, and Washington. The same applies to historians of other Grand Lodges in the region. It is for this reason that I am personally very glad that researchers from the region who consulted many of these archives are today here with us, and that some of them are the leading experts on Freemasonry in their home countries, like Professor Conti from Italy, Professor Kok from Hungary, Dr. Košir from Slovenia, and Dr. Toševa Karković from Croatia. I am also very glad to see that participants from Serbia are also top experts in their fields of study, and that some of them have published books on Freemasonry, or books in which they also dealt with Freemasonry and some of the leading Freemasons. I should like to emphasize for the discrete character of Freemasonry has caused many problems and misunderstanding. Additional problem was anti-Masonic propaganda that was organized in the past by some churches and also by fascist regimes. Hundreds of anti-Masonic pamphlets and books were published in the region during the 1930s and the 1940s, and they are full of very bizarre publications. This has all left a dire legacy in the region and many stereotypes and negative preconceptions on Freemasonry. It is exactly for this reason that scholarly research into Freemasonry is so important. I wish you a very successful conference, and on behalf of regular Grand Lodge of Serbia and my personal name, please allow me to wish you fruitful meeting, fruitful conference, and to produce some of the important remarks which might be printed and stay for education in the future, and to enjoy Belgrade, to enjoy our friendship and our hospitality. And last but not least, due to your great effort for the contribution in this conference, Regular Grand Lodge of Serbia will give you one small present during this conference. This is a monograph, which I mentioned in this my addressing, written and edited by Professor Slobodan Marković and published by Regular Grand Lodge of Serbia about 100th anniversary of Grand Lodge of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenians, Yugoslavia. Thank you very much for coming, and God bless all of us.
Okay. Dear distinguished guests, dear colleagues, one lady which we have to emphasize, and actually all good friends that have come together with us to join us in this very interesting, provocative, but I think unavoidable scientific and academic entrepreneurship that we enrolled in today. I would just briefly like to address several issues and of course to mention a couple more information in a technical and logistical way. First, we will work today until probably 5, I think. Slobodno will speak more about the program afterwards, and after that, as you all know, we will have some short break for the lunch today, and after the finishing of the conference, we will have really very interesting achievement, I think as well, one of the rare occasions that Professor Marković was also very kind and willing to present a small tour, so-called Freemasons tour, Masonic tour through the Belgrade city, and after that, of course, those who survive, actually, especially people who are guests, we will finish with a small dinner tonight. Concerning logistics here, we are here for everything that you need during the day. If you need coffee, refreshment, whatsoever, we will have a lunch break is down at the 3rd floor in the room 105. We will have some small coffee break before that, and in the meantime, if you need anything, Institute will be more than willing to offer that and to help you with any facilities. So, concerning the event, I really do have, from all of my heart, to thank to Professor Marković, who is, as you know, our leading historian for this kind of academic, if I may say, serious research of issues connected with Freemasonry in Serbia and Yugoslavia. I have to remind you about his book from 2009 about the history of the regular Grand Lodge in Serbia. And recently, I think I was one of the first to see that actually he finished his really big work and great achievement history of the Grand Lodge of Yugoslavia, which is recently been published with a lot of material that has been for the first time presented, and as I was following that, it is really work of several years. And I really have to congratulate him. On the other hand, really to thank him for the idea, which he came with like half a year ago, that we should use this very interesting occasion of 100 years of constitution of the Grand Lodge of Yugoslavia, and to organize some academic research and event with really important researches of the Freemasonry as a system, as a phenomena, and so on. And I was really more than happy that the Institute was in a way really that we got the opportunity to be actually the first academic institution that has tried to organize event like this. Of course, we also have to thank Professor Rasolić and his organization, Regular Grand Lodge of Serbia, and some really concrete people who are not today with us, who helped us really facilitated with their own resources also, I have to say, possibility to bring 5 really distinguished guests from different countries that Professor Rasolić already mentioned, and I think that in the end we really got 12, and this is also my news, not 11 as we announced it, but 12 very distinguished researchers. The news is of course that we succeeded with a great effort to bring also through video link Professor Oscar Barbosa, our friend from Costa Rica, who is now in Warsaw doing some researches, who is really a great expert on Freemasonry in Latin America, so we will spread also our research. And I have to thank also our young colleague Rajko Petrović, who has really indicated me about his research and made this contact, and we are happy that we also had Oscar together with us. Speaking about the importance of the Freemasonry as a phenomenon and the way that we had or can deal with it, I just have to say several things. First, being in Serbia, definitely you will see that at the tour, but also during the researches that we will have presented. Freemasonry, whatever one may think about that as a system of values, as an organization, has put very strong and deep traces within the modern history of contemporary Serbia. From its, let me say, uprising of Karađorđe onwards, Freemasons have played very significant and important role, of course, in a different way, in a different circumstances, but from the renewal, let me say, or rise of the modern Serbia up to today, it is, I think, unavoidable to understand the history of contemporary Serbia, Yugoslavia as well, without taking account about the importance and the role of Freemasonry. So, of course, we may speak about a lot of problems. Professor Rasolić just mentioned some of them, but usually, as we all know, Freemasonry was not very, how should I say, very open institution during the centuries. It is changing a bit in the last time, in recent decades, but definitely a lot of tradition of Freemasonry, of course, very much not present and not documented and so on. That's why we have the basic and the biggest problem with dealing with Freemasonry, that a lot of things that we happen to meet or to see or to hear about are somewhere in a vague sphere of speculation or urban legends or whatsoever. But my point is, and I will finish with that, that though we usually will not have all the data that we need, that sometimes it is really dubious, could you really find or trace the real archives and real documents, even with the lack of the documents, and let me say that what we have, we definitely have to include this phenomena in research of all the different fields, going from political theory up to systems of power and so on and so on. And on the other hand, when I speak about the tradition of the masonry and dealing with the masonry here as well, I have to mention also that we had, I think Belgrade was the second place after Berlin, that we had the anti-mason, the famous or notorious, however you hear for that exhibition, anti-masonry exhibition, organized I think by Prokic.
Sure, authorities, but they use
that as well. So in that sense, there is also a tradition that was strongly waging its war or fighting against the masonry here as well. So in many ways, I'm finishing, definitely there's a lot of material in our tradition and in our country that we have to work on and to understand really Freemasonry in the future. Of course, this is one of the beginnings, and I'm really happy that we will have people who have done a great deal in dealing with that in their own countries. Professor Markovic spoke very nicely about the conference that he attended. I think it was last year that Professor Košir organized in Slovenia, but also there are many other great experts that we have today with us from Italy, from Hungary, and even our domestic experts. And I think that will help both more than interesting and opening and enlightening, or let me say, illuminating researches and contribution today. And finally, I really do hope that we will produce very interesting and open debate, but on the other hand, that this will finish with very good proceedings in the future that will be published either maybe somewhere out, or if not, then in Serbia, or maybe the both variants whatsoever. Once more, thank you all for coming, being with us today. I wish to all our participants fruitful work today, and that they feel nice with us in Belgrade. And I will, at the end, return or pass the floor to Professor Markovic to really open that in a technical and engineering way that we should start time. Thank you very much.
I will be very short. I would just like to say that in June 1919, the Grand Lodge of Serbs, Croats and Slovenaca Јugoslавија was established. So recently it was the centenary. This year is this great celebration, and it is an opportunity to discuss in elaborate and critical manner achievements and failures of Yugoslav Masonry, but also impact and contribution to the development of Southeast European societies made by various Freemasonic endeavors in the previous 2 centuries. This is also an opportunity, and that's something that I'd like to emphasize, to strengthen scholarly approach to this topic, as opposed to various Masonological and publicist approaches that have obscured the whole topic to a certain degree, although they contributed as well to the topic. The area covered by the conference includes also Central Europe, because without Central Europe we cannot understand what was happening here, because the main influence came from Central Europe. And please allow me to thank the organizers, thank the regular Column of Serbia for accepting to support this, to thank Svetislav Todorovic, who did art design, to thank Mr. Tahir Hasanovic, who sponsored our cocktail yesterday for the foreign participants, and of course to thank the Institute for European Studies. And I would like to take this opportunity to say something as someone who is also at the university and at the Institute, which is rare today, that the Institute for European Studies has become a real oasis of pluralism. And this is a very rare thing today, because here we freely discuss liberal thinkers, conservative thinkers. Among our members were the main proponents of abortion and those who see it in different way. Among our members were some of the leading liberals, but also some people of different orientation, and also some of the Euro fanatic people, but also some people who are very Eurosceptic. So everything is here in this institute, and this is why this is an excellent platform, excellent place to discuss also the topic. So I would like to thank our director, Misha Đurković, for continuing this tradition of the institute that started in the 1990s, when the Institute for European Studies operated under the regime of Slobodan Milošević, but without any problem it succeeded. So thank you very much to Professor Rasinić, to Dr. Đurković. Marković. Now we open the conference, and in a few minutes we will start with the first panel.
I just want to thank you once again and to excuse myself because I have other commitments, either Masonic, either profane during the day, so I will leave you. And once again, I wish you fruitful work, and I hope some proceedings and this video material of the conference will be on disposal for postponed learning and understanding of the conclusions of this conference. And last but not least, Regular Lodge of Serbia will organize several conferences on the scholar level and academic level in the next period. So I also invite you and hope that you will come to give your outstanding contribution for further understanding of Freemasonry in this region. Thank you.
So, the first panel, I would like to invite Professor Fulvio Conti. You can also stay here, okay? Dr. Ljubinka Toševa-Karković, Dr. Eric Becker, and Professor Attila Pok.
You can say, if you need, this is the way of
Does anyone need a PowerPoint? Okay. And I ask some of our young colleagues who will.
Sorry, because I in the program I was in the fourth place. So
No. That's absolutely fine. No. You can give it. Give it to us. We will just put. Can I ask some of our young colleagues from the Institute just to go to the presentation of Professor Kosh? No, before that it is. Just push there. Okay, thank you.
Probajte malo da podignete više gore samo. Znači, tu iza je. Dajte meni sad će da vidim. Dajte mi.
na program.
Okay, I think we can start. I would like to introduce our first panelist, Professor Fulvio Conti, who is a professor of contemporary history at the Department of Political and Social Sciences at the University of Florence. He teaches at the Cesare Alfieri School of Political Sciences and is the dean of the school since recently. And from 1991 till 2004, he taught history of contemporary Italy at the Smith College Junior Year in Italy, in Massachusetts, and at the Italian headquarters in Middlebury College in Vermont. He was professor invité in Paris at the École Normale Supérieure in 2011 and at École des Hautes Études, Sciences Po, and at the Institut d'études politiques, Sciences Po again, in 2015. He directs the collection on Francmasonry, on Freemasonry, of Classique Garnier publisher in Paris, and is a member of the scientific committee of the Cesare Alfieri series published by Firenze University Press. His research includes 4 directions: the history of Italian political system in the liberal age, something common with our director, the history of associations, voluntary work and welfare state, the history of Freemasonry in the 19th and the 20th centuries, and the economic history and that of the administrations of local ruling classes, with particular regards to the events of the electricity industry, infrastructure, and urban public services. And his most recent books are The Italy of the Democrats, Risorgimento, Left Freemasonry and Associations in the 19th and 20th Century, Milan 2000, Civic Culture and Patriotism, History and Military Brotherhood in Florence, published in 2001, History of Italian Freemasonry, from the Risorgimento to Fascism in Bologna, published in Bologna in 2003, Freemasonry and civil religions, secular culture and political liturgies between the 18th and the 20th centuries, in Bologna in 2008, and Freemasonry and the Unity of Italy, Freemasonry Nation Building, which he edited in Marco Novarina in Bologna in 2011. Finally, something that we learned yesterday has something to do with Belgrade as well. Masonic Florence, the matriculation book of the Loggia Concordia, published in Florence in 2012. So I would just like to say that Professor Conti has given a very important contribution to the academic studies, because he has placed the history of Italian Freemasonry within the history of Italian state, Italian culture, and Italian intellectual and social history. So he has given us a model how we can do it elsewhere. And he is a great promoter of Italian culture. We all have to read Italian, we all have to use Google Translator and everything else, and to exploit our colleagues who speak Italian to be able to follow his books. So this is another after effect. So Professor Conti, the floor is yours. And Professor Conti will have the topic, the Grand Orient of Italy and the Balkan and Danubian Europe Freemasonries.
Thank you, Slobodan. Good morning to everybody. Thank you, Slobodan, for this kind presentation. And thank you for invitation to all the organizers and this combination between university, the Institute for European Studies. We studied with Stanislav at the European Institute in Florence several years ago. So for me it's a real pleasure to be here. My first time. I hope to come here more times in the future. So, in brief, the Grand Orient of Italy was re-established in 1859 after the end of the Second War of Independence and a few months before Garibaldi's expedition of the Mille, two events that should have decreed the birth of a united and independent Italy. From that moment on, until the birth of fascism, Italian Freemasonry had a strong democratic and progressive connotation. While the brothers were engaged in battles to socially and politically modernize the country and secularize society, another common element, however, was a strong sense of patriotism, an obstinate defense of the state that came out of the Risorgimento struggles against its internal and external enemies, especially against the Catholic Church, which did not recognize its legitimacy. Anti-monarchic forces and internationalist ideals were set aside to fully support Italy's ambition to become a great power and to play an important role in Southern Europe and the Mediterranean Sea. This is one of the possible interpretations of the creation by the Grand Orient of Italy of several Masonic lodges in Central and Danubian Europe, the Near East, and countries along the southern shore of the Mediterranean Sea, a phenomenon that began in the 1860s and lasted until the end with the founding of these lodges. The Italian brothers favored Freemasonry spread to countries where it was persecuted or where no regular lodges existed. Nevertheless, at the same time, this was a way to extend Italy's influence into some regions of the Ottoman Empire that, between the 18th and the 20th centuries, had seen significant political and institutional instability, regions where economic and commercial opportunities had opening up in those years. The network of Italian lodges abroad was, in short, a sort of parallel diplomacy encouraged by the various governments that used them somewhat to push their political goals. The spread of Italian Masonic laws in Central and Eastern Europe began, as I said, in the 1860s. Greece was one of the first regions toward which the Grand Orient of Italy looked, with the dual purpose of promoting the Masonic institution spread in Europe, and secondly, of consolidating its presence abroad by affirming itself as the Masonic organization of reference in the Mediterranean basin. The Grand Orients of Italy's first two lodges were founded in 1862, one in Athens, the other on the island of Syros. 4 years later, 6 other lodges, all affiliated to the Grand Orient of Italy, 5 on mainland Greece and 1 in the island of Corfu, came into existence at the same time. And then, in 1867, these 8 lodges asked to leave the Grand Orient of Italy to create an autonomous and independent Grand Orient of Greece in 1867. Another interesting case is that of Italy's Masonic presence in Macedonia, especially in Thessalonica. This city was one of the Ottoman Empire's most progressive and dynamic, with a population consisting mainly of Sephardic Jews. The Macedonia Lodge, founded there in 1864, was one of 11 that the Grand Orient of Italy came to rely upon the Turkish Empire at the end of the 1870s. 5 were based in Istanbul, 4 in Smyrna, and 1 in Magnesia. The Masonic presence in the Ottoman Empire became quite robust at the beginning of the 20th century. One Thessalonian lodge, Macedonia Risen, Macedonia Risorta, assumed particular importance by becoming the gathering place and the sort of organizational front for the young Turk movement. The architect of the lodge's rebirth, as well as supported of a coalition with the group of the nationalists and constitutionalists from the Ottoman Freedom Association, was Emanuele Carasso, a Sephardic lawyer of Italian origin. Member of the Macedonia Risen at the end of 1902, he became worshipful master and encouraged the enrollment of numerous individuals who held top position in both the Union and Progress Committee and the government formed in 1909 after the deposition of Sultan Abdul Hamid II. After Mehmed V's rise to power in 1909, the Grand Orient of Italy openly claimed the role played by Freemasonry in the revolution of the Young Turks. Again, in 1909, it contributed to the birth of the Ottoman Grand Orient, to which official recognition was immediately offered. It also signed an agreement that allowed it to maintain the lodges at its dependency in Ottoman territory and to create new ones. However, when Italo-Turkish War broke out in September 1911, this good relation did not prevent the Grand Orient of Italy from enthusiastically greeting the Italian ships that departed for the Libyan conquest and giving all its support to the colonial enterprise. It was a choice that attracted multiple and contradictory criticisms of the Masonic institution. In any event, As the Turkish government shortly thereafter shifted towards authoritarianism, the Grand Orient of Italy did not hesitate to distance itself, creating conditions that gradually reduced the Italian Masonic presence in Anatolia. Thessalonica Italian lodges had a completely different fate, as the city had become part of the Kingdom of Greece after the Peace of Bucharest in August 1913 that ended the Second Balkan War. The Macedonia Rising Lodge remained active until November 1925, when the Grand Master of the Grand Orient of Italy, Domizio Torrigiani, decreed the self-dissolution of all the lodges under him so as prevent their being affected by a newly approved fascist law in which Freemasonry was defined as a secret society and its suppression sanctioned. In 1925, however, Labor et Lux, another Italian lodge established in Thessalonica, decided to continue its activity and by 1931 had 34 affiliates. This lodge, the majority of whose members were from the Jewish community, played a decisive role in re-establishing Italian Freemasonry. It was one of the few lodges represented in Paris at the January 1930 meeting that marked the birth of the Grand Orient of Italy in exile. Now just a few words about Romania. The first core of lodges adhering to the Grand Orient of Italy was formed in Romania between 1874 and 1876. There were set up in Bucharest, three were set up in Bucharest, another was in Giurgiu, the important city on the Danube at the border with Bulgaria. There was another in the Moldovan region of Vaslui, named after the King of Italy, Vittorio Emanuele II. The development of these lodges was interrupted in 1876 by the outbreak of the Russian-Turkish conflict, with Romania aligning with Russia and proclaiming its independence from the Ottoman Empire. This independence was definitively endorsed by the 1878 Berlin Peace Conference. The conquest of independence had profound repercussions on the Romanian and Masonic world, which sought to create an autonomous national Grand Lodge by bringing together most of the lodges that had belonged to foreign lodges until then. The initiative took form in 1879 and led to the establishment of a Grand Orient of Romania, to which the three Italian lodges in Bucharest also belonged. In December 1880, the Grand Orient of Romania ended its short existence, and its membership was absorbed in 1881 by the Grand National Lodge of Romania. An army officer, Captain Constantin Moroiu, became its Grand Master and undisputed leader. Moroiu stood out for a very centralized, idiosyncratic management style and for the excessive ease with which he bestowed high Masonic degrees. The main foreign lodges often conflicted with the institution he led, leading to the creation of new lodges under their control in Romanian territory. The Grand Orient of Italy's case was representative, having founded 21 lodges in Romania in only 7 years, between 1879 and 1885. After 1885, the push for the construction of new lodges in Romania, placed on the dependence of the Grand Orient of Italy, almost stopped. In any case, of all the Italian lodges created in the country, only the Romanian Lodge in Bucharest was active in 1914, having been re-established in 1906. In the period preceding the First World War, the other two Central European countries where the Grand Orient of Italy had some lodges under its control were Bulgaria and Serbia, as you know. The first trace of an Italian Masonic presence in Bulgaria dates back to the early 1880s, when Hope Lodge was active for a short time in Rushuk, a town on Danube River. The second lodge, Acacia, was much longer lived, having been founded in 1905 in Santi, a Thracian city that belonged to Bulgaria for a few years. After the defeat of Bulgaria in the First World War with the 1920 Treaty of Neuilly, the city was definitively assigned to Greece along with other Western Thracian territories. Acacia Lodge survived until 1925, as well as another lodge, the Mater, founded in Sofia in 1919 by the Grand Orient of Italy. Its worshipful master was the economist and the statistician Adolfo Maria Morgantini, at that time the director of the Italian Chamber of Commerce in Bulgaria. As for Serbia, the first Italian lodge, you know well this history, but I repeat it. The first Italian lodge was set up in October 1876 during a particularly troubled period in the Balkan Principality history. The Belgrade Lodge, called the Light of the Balkans, was set up with the help of the Italian consul Luigi Giovannini Ceva di San Michele, demonstrating that a new government, led by the Freemason Agostino de Pretis, leader of the left-wing party, was interested in introducing Italy to the political diplomatic games in of the Slavic area. Light of the Balkans Lodge marked the Freemasonry rebirth in Serbia, with membership increasing among the numerous political and cultural leaders, including university professor Mikhailo Baltrović, Stefan Popović and Svetomir Nikolaevich, as well as the painter Dorde Milovanović. In February 1882, it was joined by a second lodge, Serbian Cooperation, also affiliated with the Grand Orient of Italy. It was a highly politicized lodge whose worshipful master was Svetomir Nikolaevich, one of the founders of the Serbian Radical Party and of the local Red Cross. He was mayor of Belgrade and in 1894 prime minister. Its members also included the economist Mikhailo Vujic, another radical party exponent who was minister of finance and prime minister in 1901-1902. In 1883, Light of the Balkans was dissolved, and from its ashes rose Concord Work and Fortitude Lodge, under the patronage of the Grand Orient of Italy, of which the previously mentioned Mikhailo Baltrović was a worshipful master. In 1885, when Serbian Cooperation Lodge ceased to exist, many of its affiliates decided to join Concord Lodge, which remained the only Masonic lodge in Serbia until 1890. That year, some of its members including Svetomir Nikolaevich, founded a new lodge called Pobratim, which was placed as dependent of the symbolic Grand Lodge of Hungary. It confirmed, this act confirmed that the Italian Masonic influence in Serbia had been replaced by the majors, a fact confirmed by the dissolution of Concord Work and Fortitude Lodge, decreed by the Grand Orient of Italy in 1905. At that time, however, it should be said that relations between the Italian and Hungarian Freemasonries were good. Freemasonry returned to Hungary after the 1867 Ausgleich, yet it continued to be prohibited and persecuted in Austria. Many Hungarian exiles contributed to the resurrection of the Budapest lodges. After the 1848-1849 revolution, many fled to Italy and France, where they were initiated into Masonic secrets. Between 1862 and 1865, 33 Hungarian nationals, including Count Ferenc Pulski, were initiated in Turin, in one lodge of Turin, named Dante Alighieri. Returning home in 1867, Pulski was one of the architects of the 1870 founding of the Hungarian Grand Lodge of St. John, becoming its first Grand Master. He was also elected the first Grand Master of the symbolic Grand Lodge of Hungary, the institution that arose in 1886 from the merger of the Grand Lodge of St. John and the Grand Orient of Hungary, founded in 1871. At his death, Pulski, in 1897, the Grand Orient of Italy dedicated a moving remembrance to him. It should be recalled that Lajos Kossuth, the father of Hungarian independence and also a Mason, spent the latter part of his life in Italy until his death in Turin in 1894. And in 1889, a delegation of about 800 major citizens, including several Masons, went specifically to Turin on a sort of political pilgrimage meant to pay homage to the illustrious patriot. The relations of the Grand Lodge of Hungary with Italian Freemasonry, and especially with the Serb, deteriorated beyond repair in 1908, when the Italians refused to adopt the protest of the Serbian brothers and endorsed Bosnia-Herzegovina annexation by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Serbian Masons then sought alliances and protection elsewhere. In 1909 and 1910, two new lodges were established in Belgrade, the first affiliated to the Grand Orient of France, and the second to the Grand Lodge of Hamburg. In 1909, the first Scottish Rite organization saw the influence of the Supreme Council of Romania. In addition, in 1912, with the support of the Greek Mason, the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite of Serbia was founded and was accepted the same year as a regular member of the International Congress of the Supreme Council of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite held in Washington. Almost all the Serbian lodges associated with foreign Masonic lodges passed to its dependency. Among them, the Italian Concord Work and Fortitude Lodge, which was reconstituted in March 1912. With this act, however, the presence of Italian lodge in Serbian territory did not end. In 1909, a lodge of the Grand Orient of Italy, called Earth and Sun, was founded in Monastir, a city now part of the Republic of Macedonia. However, in 1913, after the Balkan Wars, it was taken from the Ottoman Empire and then assigned to Serbia, taking the name of Bitola. After the war, the city became part of the kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes. In addition, the Italian lodge remained active until 1925. I have more to read, but I stop here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. You raised one question that we cannot resolve. Of course, Professor Milinković and I are discussing all the time. We are not sure what happened with this lodge because they stopped working, but we have a document stating that they continued to be in correspondence with the Grand Orient, that they held conferences, but they actually didn't have lodge meetings, but held lodge conferences. So that is something we need to check. We don't know. Only you can help us to discuss that. So to resolve that. So thank you very much. Now we can see how developed relations Grand Orient of Italy had in the region. And now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Ljubinka Toševa-Karković, who studied political science at the Faculty of Political Science in Belgrade, and she received her PhD from the Faculty of Political Science in Ljubljana in 1987. She worked as a researcher in various institutes in Yugoslavia and Croatia. She did research on the role of Freemasons as a special group in several, and she did that research in several cities using their archives, in Rijeka, in Belgrade, in Rome, in Budapest, and in Washington, D.C. As a result of this work, she published 2 books. In 2007, I'm just referring to her books dealing with Freemasonry. She has a lot of other books dealing with Serbian Orthodox community in Rijeka, etc. That is another field of her study. But referring to her book dealing with Freemasonry, in 2007 she published her monograph D'Annunzio in Rijeka, Myths, Politics and the Role of Freemasonry in Serbo-Croat, Croat-Serbian, and it covers the period of 1919-1920. In 2017, she published a book in English, Freemasonry, Politics and Rijeka Fiume, from 1785 to 1944 in Washington, by Westphalia Press, a publishing house specialized in Freemasonic monographs. And I should also like to say that she published an article on D'Annunzio in Gladišta a long time ago.
30 years ago.
And I somehow, members of the editorial team told me that she deeply divided the editorial team. They didn't know what should we do with this topic dealing with Freemasonry. They had a very, very long talks. They couldn't dare to publish, and they couldn't dare not to publish. And at the end, they published. So that was the first breakthrough that in an academic publication, a topic of Freemasonry was published during the period of socialism. So we should thank Dr. Karković for opening. And of course, she also studied at my faculty with Professor Stanočić. Ljubinka, the floor is yours. Ljubinka will speak about the relevance of Freemasonry for the history of Fiume Rijeka. And I should say that for her book, she was actually awarded a special award by the city of Rijeka.
Yes, thank you. So the appearance, presence, organization and characteristic of various Masonic order in Rijeka, Fiume ones, reflected the state and legal history of this free city and port. This history is in accordance with the general characteristic of the history of Freemasonry that, based on status, operated in organized manner and was loyal to the state and its political system. The first period when the Freemasons were present in Fiume coinciding with Josephinism era, then anti-Habsburg and pro-French Freemasonry find ground in Rijeka. So from ideological point of view, this Freemasonry was politicized, anti-monarchist, liberal, separatist, closed and secret. The first lodge in Rijeka had a narrow circle of supporters without any members from the city. At the same time, behind the institution of the governors of Fiume, mostly nominated for this position from the eastern part of Empire, Transylvania, where the Hungarian system of strict observance was, in activity, organized in 1717 the first lodge in Fiume. At the beginning of Joseph II reforms, the order of strict observance supported him, so the Masonic lodge in Rijeka was public and legal. But the clash between Freemasonry and the Emperor around 1785 forced the lodge to operate secretly. We know only that the first, second, third and fourth governors in Rijeka were members of strict observance. There is also one hypothesis that in local Orthodox Church operated one lodge of Melisino system, with Georgi and Mikhailo Melisino as father and Russian consul in Fiume, and his son as cadet in Russia. Melisino order belonged to secret, military, Templar and occult Freemasonry. The second period of dealing Masonry in Rijeka was the Illyrian provinces 1908-1912, when the lodges of the Order of Grand Orient of Italy with the city of Milan were being constituted along the Adriatic littoral. These lodges were public, propagandistic, nepotistic, lucrative. The members from Fiume were the wealthy merchants, officials in the French administration of the city, which made part of French administrative system of the city. French Masonry of Grand Orient was public, lucrative, nepotistic, and propagandistic. The third period of the Masonry in Rijeka was when the gubernium of Fiume was re-established in 1822 up to the revolution 1848-49 in Hungary. In Fiume came back then British merchant Lord John Freemason, now British consul in Fiume. He opened a lodge in his house. Beside him, the members of the lodge were the same nepotistic persons which were members of the lodge during Illyrian provinces. This lodge was only poorly lucrative. The fifth period, very limited data suggests that an operative unit of the Knights of Malta operated in the castle above Fiume, which owner was the great prior of the new Priorate of Ireland, head of the Scottish Templars, Laval Legion. This hypothesis sustained also the presence of his son Albert, which politically cooperated with Illyrians concerned to the fight against the Ottoman Empire in neighboring Bosnia. The lodge seat might have been in Karlovac today, while the unit in Juna was only used to negotiate some dealings. The fifth period, when in 1866 Hungarian political emigration came back from Western Europe to Hungary, the best period of Hungarian Freemasonry started. The first Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Austro-Hungarian Empire, Count Gyula Andrássy, was Mason, and with him all new leading class in Hungarian part of dual monarchy. As member of Hungarian Freemasonry becomes also the Fiumans of the most prominent position. Giovanni de Jota, for example, mayor of the city for the next 24 years in 1872-1896, was member of the Liberal Party of Tisza and belonged to the Lodge Humboldt in Budapest. He worked to ensure the economic progress of Fiume as a port, progress as Masonic ideal. During his role as governor, underwent the most comprehensive and most important period of modernization of Fiume. That means the completion of the railway line Rijeka-Vukovar, The construction of modern port, which store rooms for export of agricultural products from Hungary. The construction of commercial fleet for maritime transport. 4. The construction of representative buildings for accommodation of the Hungarian administration. And it's very important to underline that in the first year of, when he was the mayor of Rijeka in 1993, started the construction of a government palace, which is now still in Rijeka and dominant over the city. The sixth period of the Freemasons in Rijeka is when the lodge in Fiume was founded in March 91. This was the time of big economic recession in Hungary, and when the time when all Freemasons were not more in life. The Lodge Sirius was under protection of Grand Lodge of Hungary. Its founders were almost Hungarians of Fiume, liberal professionals and officials in the state-run Adrian Maritime Society. On a list of 123 members of Lodge Sirius, beginning from 91 to 1918, result that the founders and some of the members of Sirius Lodge were until then members of different lodges in Hungary: Demokratia, Bulgaria, Haladas, Patria, Philanthropia. The biggest acceptance in the lodge was in 1999 year, 14 members. In 1913, 11 members, and in 1998, 10 members. Members of Fiume, Abacia, and Sushak were together 28, and the other were Hungarians working in Rijeka. Between the most prominent members from Fiume were the mayor of the city, Antonio Vio, and the big industrialist staying near the name of Andrea Osonjak. That members in the year after the end of dual monarchy will have a leading role in political history of the city. On these two persons miss only the name of key person who was Mason too. This is the person Salvatore Belašić. On January 1919, Antonio Vio, as mayor of Fiume, visited the old Italian lodge in Rome Rienzi, which belonged to the Grande Oriente d'Italia. So it seems that then the future obedience of the Lodge Sirius after the end of dual monarchy was systematic under protection of Grande Oriente d'Italia. On 30 October 1919 was founded the Italian National Council, Consiglio Nazionale Italiano, as temporary authority which executive committee was composed of members of Lodge Sirius. In collaboration with Italian President Vittorio Emanuele Orlando, member of Lodge Propaganda Masonica in Rome, and Minister of Foreign Affairs Sidney Sonino, the key members of Consiglio Nazionale Italiano, Freemasons in the same time, sent funds, something through information from Fiume, with the goal, together with members of Italian Commission on the Paris Peace Conference, to prevent systematization of French military bases in Rijeka. At the same time, the other Masonic obedience in Rome, Gran Loggia d'Italia, founded new lodge in Fiume, 30 Ottobre. The division between the both obediences in Italy had repercussion also in Fiume. Some of ex-volunteers, now fascist and member of Consiglio Nazionale Italiano, after resignation of the government of President Orlando, take contact with Gabriele D'Annunzio for occupying Rijeka. At the same time, the members of Sirius Lodge stay away from the members of Loggia 30 Ottobre. The member of the Lodge of 30 Ottobre continued to collaborate with Mussolini's regime. The members of Sirius Lodge, when Vittorio Emanuele Orlando resigned, and Count Francesco Fausto Nitti an Italian consulate in Rijeka. The member of the Loja series continued to collaborate with new President Nitti and Italian consulate in Rijeka. With the arrival of power of Mussolini in Italy, the members of Loggia Trenta Ottobre come up to their political career. After prohibition of Masonry in 1926, they are still in power, but as fascists, not more as Masons. The members of Lodge Sirius in the time of fascist regime remain those what they always were known as human caste. This caste was relic of long-lasting Hungarian way of making politics. As human caste, they continued to react and live in fascist Italy undisturbed, not because they were very rich, but because they were owner of so many secrets and secret rules. After the fall of fascism in 1943, the remaining of the human caste member tried to cooperate with German occupation authorities in Rijeka in some suburb Sušak and Fiume, hoping to prolong their political lives. However, the fall of German fascism and the victory of national liberation movement in Italian Fiume was also the end of human caste. The history of Freemasonry in Fiume shows the perennial politicization of the community. The importance of and the role of different Freemasonic order in the political history of Fiume. The importance of the port changed over the time, but in line with economic policy of the region and therefore also in policy in the normal sense of the word. This shows also the problem of long-lasting Adriatic ocean on the Paris Peace Conference, where the Freemasons from Rijeka took also part. All this I published in my last book, which is translated also in Washington. I will leave this copy to the Institute. In this book you will find many data. For example, the photos of different Masons in Rijeka, which show biograms. You can find also the key person, the big master of Loggia Trenta Ottobre in fascist dress. So you shall find many of these different orders, Masonic orders, which were present in Rijeka. But the key document, I think, is the relation of American consul in Rijeka, who saw attack of the Grand Master of Loggia Trenta Ottobre on the autonomist government of the state of Fiume, Riccardo Zanella. And not only American consul wrote how was the attack on the autonomist government of Zanella, but he designed how it was happened. This document is from Washington. And I think this is the most important document because an independent document in that time, in 1922, give impression what really happened under fascist attack in Rijeka on the government of Free State of Fiume. So my gift to the Institute.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now I will give the floor to Dr. Harry Cleaver, who is Associate Professor at the University of Debrecen, teaching political science there. He has published extensively on history and political culture of Southeastern Europe. And he published a book on national narcissism in English and several edited collections. He has written a lot also that is interesting maybe for us here on the history of Bunjevac separate group and on Hungarian and South Slav history in the first decades of the 20th century. He completed his PhD in modern history at the University of Oxford in 2008, and that was a PhD on Hungarian Irredentism during the interwar period. And he also holds MA degrees from the University of Oxford as well and the Central European University. So he will speak about his presentation is entitled "The Light Falls: Freemasonry in Hungary between 1919 and 1939." So Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I must say my presentation will be a bit less formal than the ones before because of certain experiences I've had presenting this topic in the past. The first time I came across Freemasonry was in work over a decade ago doing research for my own doctorate and as a research assistant for Timothy Garton-Ash and Robert Gerard. It had nothing to do with Freemasonry, I thought, and yet every time I began work on White Terror in Hungary for Robert Gerard, or work on current events in Eastern Europe for Timothy Garton-Ash, particularly in Hungary, I kept stumbling across documents about Masonry. The same can be said about my work on revisionism in the 1930s in Hungary. In a negative sense, like flashes of light, a document would appear suddenly about Masonry, a mention of Masonry, and an obsession of mythic Masonry, without which I don't think one can fully understand the history of Hungary in that period, or the region as a whole in that period. Nonetheless, when I included a chapter on Masonry in my thesis, its reception was, let us say, less than delightful. Fortunately or unfortunately, I had to cut words anyway. One has a word limit when one does work of that sort. And so the first thing to go overboard was that chapter. Thinking I would publish it later as an article, I presented it again and again, or I simply presented the idea. And each time I presented the idea of submitting an article, Freemasonry, in a negative sense, in Hungary in the interwar period, the reaction was interesting to say the least. As if someone hit you with a bright flash of light, the expression was almost universal. As if it were some negative thing, like a flash of light striking someone, and either as if they were seeing for the first time some distasteful, disgusting object, or an object they thought completely irrelevant to the period at the time. Why might they have thought it irrelevant? Well, I chose as the starting date 1919, March 21st, 1919. Béla Kun and his cronies established a communist regime in Hungary. And one of the first acts of that regime was to ban Freemasonry. From that moment in Hungary, from that moment until the moment I stop, one has almost unbroken history of Freemasonry not being able to operate openly or legally in Hungary. The only regulation of the Béla Kun period, as far as I know, that was maintained in the Horthy period was the ban of Freemasons. Horthy as well upheld the ban of Freemasonry when he came to power. That's the only law. Perhaps Attila knows something else. It's the only one I know. He allowed, again, sale of alcohol. Béla Kun had a prohibition against alcohol. He stopped the nationalization of private property and all the other delightful aspects of communism that we know, but he kept the ban on Freemasonry. This is the connection, the one connection we can find between Béla Kun and Horthy. Why did Béla Kun do this? The communist obsession with eliminating all possible intellectual cooperation, collaboration outside of the communist movement is one explanation. Another possible explanation is rooted in the region and the period, a long-term distaste for or fear of Freemasons that came from the crown, despite the fact that Masonry was allowed before 1919 in Hungary. There was a clear fear from the crown. Freemasonry. The third aspect, strange aspect, is more related to Horthy. It's the spread in 1918 and 1919 of ideas, partly from Germany, partly from Russia, of Masonic, Judeo-Masonic conspiracy that's breaking down order within the region and is leading to revolution and leading to destruction and eventually leading to the breakup. This idea persists even today. 10 years ago, in one of those moments when I saw the expression, a Swiss-Hungarian historian told me that it's simply a fact that Freemasons were behind the Trianon breakup of Hungary, when 2/3 of Hungarian territory were taken away, was because Freemasons had demanded this. Very strange ideas that persist to our days. Why do I say Russia? Well, the learned elders of Zion, this conspiracy theory about Jews trying to take over the world, was established, as we know, as a plot, as a fake plot by Russian secret police during the Tsarist period, attempting to explain to the people why socialism needs to be crushed. And that idea, learned elders of Zion, obsession that there's some sort of conspiracy on the left and amongst Jews, appears very early in Budapest. I found one of the documents I found was a document from the Romanian occupation of Budapest. The local military authorities, Hungarian military authorities, who were expected to maintain order under the Romanian occupation, sent out a circular explaining to all military officers in Hungary and sent the circular to military officers in Horthy's camp that there was a Jewish conspiracy that involved Freemasons and that they were trying to take over the world. This is something that needs to be rooted out. By the end of the Romanian occupation of Budapest and Eastern Hungary, of course, Horthy's forces came to power. And on their way to coming to power, some of them committed terrible atrocities throughout Hungary, Western Hungary in particular. One of the leading officers responsible for some of the most outrageous atrocities, Pál Krónai, wrote to his troops in a very early period, in 1919, when he's organizing his people, that they need to be on guard for Jews and Freemasons to hunt them down and hang, in addition, of course, to anybody who represented a socialist regime. So Jews and Freemasons in this period were a target of hunting. I didn't find, unfortunately, evidence that Freemasons were caught as such, but they were a target. They were certainly a target. If it had turned out that somebody was a Freemason, I have no doubt that Krónai's people would have hanged and tortured them. So, Horthy's regime banned Freemasonry. Moreover, those terrorist organizations which have established the regime and crush this Jewish Freemasonic communist conspiracy, as they saw it, established headquarters under an organization, an umbrella organization, something you might call their own Grand Lodge, called MOVET, which moved into the Masonic headquarters, the Grand Lodge headquarters in Budapest, and took it over. As they said at the time, they smoked out the Freemasons, obscuring that light. In short, you would think there would be no story here about Freemasonry in Hungary. All we see is a story of obsession with Freemasonic ideology, corrupting the state and destroying the state and tearing it apart. But in fact, Masons, Hungarian Masons, continue to practice. They practice in a very unique way in this period. They couldn't practice in Hungary properly, not Hungary proper. But this was a period in which the surrounding countries began to play the other successor states began to play a very important role, most notably Yugoslavia. Hungarian Freemasons traveled from Hungary regularly to meetings in Yugoslavia where Freemasonry was accepted and under the protection of the country. They were able to practice elsewhere as well, in Romania, Czechoslovakia, and in a reversal, now they could practice in Austria, because of Austrian practice there, whereas before Austrians would practice in Hungary. They could go out in a way to receive the light and then bring back a little flash of the light. Practice their craft in countries surrounding. This led in return to a strengthening within Hungary of the obsession that Hungarian Freemasons were supporters of the destruction of old Hungary. For if a Freemason goes, of course the authorities knew, they didn't know all the names, but if a Freemason goes to Yugoslavia to practice his craft, is he not then supporting in some way the Yugoslav state? This was a serious accusation. This explains why, in 1938, when Anschluss happened, and finally Austria was absorbed into the Third Reich, one of the first requests the Horthy regime sent to the Germans, sent to the Nazis, was a request for a list of all Hungarians who ever practiced in the lodges in Austria. They wanted the full list of names. This is one of the first requests they made, to find out who it was who had been crossing the border and practicing the craft in Austria. This obsession was clear. I'll leave it at that, but in my work and in this chapter, which I hope, after 10 years, after a decade, might find a place for publication. Finally, I'm in a room where people are not blinded by the light, as it were. Finally, it's a natural topic to talk about. Some of Hungarian history can make sense. The obsession with Freemasonry, the fear that internal traitors, whether they be Jews, Freemasons, liberals, are the cause of the destruction of the state and the destruction of all values which Hungarians held dear, can make sense and can be put in context. And in this negative sense, those flashes of light show us that as the light is falling, as darkness falls over all lodges, eventually, with the spread of Nazism in our region. In this negative sense, we can see the history of Freemasonry in Hungary explains a lot, and there's a long way to explaining more than not only the establishment of outrageously oppressive regimes in this region, but and a turn away from Enlightenment values, openness, and internationalism, but also much more disturbing later events. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Indeed, Eric, and now the fourth speaker in the first panel will be Professor Attila Pok, who is the Deputy Director of the Institute of History and the Research Center for Deputy Director at the Institute of History and the Research Center for Humanities at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. He is also Vice President of Hungarian Historical Association and permanent visiting professor of history at Columbia University in New York. His publications and courses cover three major fields: 19th and 20th century European political and intellectual history, history of modern European historiography, with special regard to political uses of history, and theory of the methodology of history writing. I should say that he is one of the Hungarian historians who have maybe the most numerous number of books in English, and they include a selected bibliography of modern historiography, published in New York by Westport in '92, something relevant for our topic, the politics of hatred in the middle of Europe, scapegoating in 20th century Hungary, history and historiography, published by Savaria University Press in 2009, and the volume co-edited with Randolph L. Graham, The Hungarian Holocaust After 50 Years, published by Columbia University Press in 1997, and volume co-edited with Stuart McIntyre and Juan Maiguasca, is that proper? The Oxford History of Historical Writing, Volume 4, published by the Oxford University Press in 2011. Professor Pock will speak about the politics of Freemasonry in Hungary, and I shall also say for those who speak Hungarian that they can find on YouTube his very excellent lecture delivered on the occasion of 3 centuries of Freemasonry, which was also an occasion when our colleague Mateusz Kosir organized the conference in Ljubljana, and Attila at that point delivered a lecture on Freemasonry. It's in Hungarian, and you can find it in YouTube.
Okay. So thank you very much for the honoring invitation here. Before I come to the actual topic, may I refer, because I think this is very appropriate, to the last decade of my Serbian collections, because during the last 10 years I have been to Belgrade several times, and this is due to the activities of a Serbian-Hungarian Historians Commission, where the Serbian president was Professor Stanovčić, whom I happened to get to know under not very nice circumstances, or I got to know him under very nice circumstances, but then our friendship continued under not very nice circumstances here, and he was the Serbian chairman of this commission, and Slobodno was the general secretary of this commission, and it was a very, very interesting work, and I'm very glad that we could do something about Serbian-Hungarian friendship. Now, some issues that I'm going to refer to have already been mentioned in the previous lecture, but let me just summarize the main periods of activity of Hungarian Freemasonry, because if we say that Freemasonry started in 1749 in Hungary, it's a long story, but approximately half of it is a period when Freemasonic activities were banned. So the first time is from 1749-1795, so then 1868 to the aftermath of the First World War, then for 5 short but very important years in the aftermath of the Second World War, and then after 89, but we very much hope that there would be no concluding year, so after 89, so that will now go on for a long time. And so the first period is of course very much connected to Enlightenment, to Mária Teresa and Joseph II, so I don't have to explain, but there are 2 names that are to be mentioned here. So how did the significance of Freemasonry concerning the spread of the Enlightenment, the origins of the major aspirations on behalf of a group of Hungarian aristocrats to contribute to the modernization of Hungary, or modernization plans of Hungary in the spirit of enlightened absolutism. That was connected historically to a gentleman, among many others, Gergely Berzevici, but why now in our scholarly memory, Gergely Berzevici has such a great significance due to this lady over there. It's very interesting that the most important contribution to the history of Hungarian Freemasonry were done by ladies.
I use her in the book.
Yeah, so
she described me very
she was also my professor. She was a fantastic professor, and she published a book about Berzevici in '67. And that time it was a kind of a breakthrough concerning the significance of Freemasonry in Hungarian politics. So, and of course we mentioned the Kossuth emigration, so it doesn't have to be repeated. And then we also mentioned the significance of the compromise and Ausgleich. And I do not want to go into the foundation of logic because that has already been summarized. But my emphasis would be, and thank you very much, thank for all the preceding speakers because I have more time to come to the most provocative part of my presentation, and that is the politics of Freemasonry in Hungary. Because so far in the presentations, if a visitor who knows nothing about the history of Freemasonry region would believe that basically Freemasonry is considered to have had a very positive impact. That is the perception. But in Hungary that is far from being the case. That is far from being the case. And why is that? We can obviously say that it's unfair or so, but a historian has to try to understand arguments. And of course in the basic documents also of the Constitution of the Hungarian Freemasonry, it said the craft excludes all political religious issues from its field of interest. But how to interpret it? This is up to the present day one of the basic issues in the everyday life also of Hungarian Freemasonry. Why? If we now look at the heyday of Hungarian Freemasonry, so the top side of Hungarian Freemasonry, that's early 20th century. That's obviously early 20th century, because that was a most promising time in the Hungarian half of the Habsburg monarchy. In spite of all the difficulties, it seemed that now there will be a long-term economic and cultural development overburdened with some social tensions for a century or two to come after 1867. There are different members, but this is perhaps the most 726 lodges, about 38,000 members. Perhaps it's an overstatement in some of the respective books. It says the only really, of course excluding Italyos, but they're really well-organized system of Masonic lodges, but it was in general perfectly integrated into the structure of dualist Hungary. But the main tenor of anti-Masonic argument is so today, and here the key role is played by a colleague called Ernest Raffai, who has written a great number of books in a hostile manner about Hungarian Freemasonry, that it was not the case. So this is the point of controversy, because he argues that the main tendency of Hungarian Masonry played the opposite role. It didn't want to strengthen Hungary in the monarchy, and it didn't want to strengthen monarchy, but exactly the opposite. If we want to figure out the major underlying causes of the collapse of the Habsburg monarchy and historical Hungary and the losses of territories, then Freemasonry played a very, very important role. Before I continue, I have to add something which is the result of a new result. So far we believe that from 1886 until the prohibition there was only this big grand symbolic Grand Lodge of Hungary that functioned. But now it's very interesting that from 1912 to 1929, so in spite of the banning, there was another Grand Lodge of Hungary. This is only it didn't include 2,000 members, it was only under 100 members, but it existed, the so-called, the Reformed Grand Lodge of Hungarian Freemasons, they are the only organized Freemasons, because Eric mentioned those Hungarian Freemasons working in foreign countries, but that was working mainly in Szeged and Szombathely, so in the south and in the west of Hungary. So now we can continue. So the problem is the interpretations of liberalism and what the relationship is between so-called democratic standards. So to what extent democracy should be implemented in the state machinery or not. This was the subject of very serious discussions in Hungary. For example, let me just go by as far as the most important ones, and now trying to refer to the acquisition. So if we want to find a general, a common denominator for the many problems, that was general suffrage before the First World War. Of course, contemporaries attached very great significance to the general suffrage, hoping that general suffrage will bring about real democracy. But when it comes to general suffrage in Austria, it doesn't. It doesn't matter. But anyway, it was in Hungary that was taken very seriously. Why was that such a controversial issue? And why did conservatives and those who consider the Hungarian Freemasons as per definition enemies of the Hungarian state, why do they focus on general suffrage? Because at least half, or only after 99 slide, Hungarian ethnicity was only a slight majority even in 1910 in Hungary, and it was believed that if general suffrage prevails, the basic pillars of Hungarian national state will be shaken. There were various alternative solutions to general suffrage, but whoever spoke about general suffrage, the other side was always saying, you are an enemy of the Hungarian nation. On the other hand, those who there were a number of important Masonic lodges in favor of the general suffrage, but it has to be emphasized, unfortunately, they were not a majority. But those who were coming up with that were very loud, and they had their instruments for that. Now, they argued the only way to survive for Hungary in the long run is to encourage the participation of nationalities in the activities of the Hungarian national state. It's only through general suffrage that in a step-by-step, moderate way, we can integrate them, we can proceed with assimilation, not in an enforced but a natural way, and at the same time we can also give the options to the organization, parties, political organization of the national minorities to survive. The second big issue was related to the relationship between the church and state, secularization. So in a country where the Catholic Church was a major pillar of the political system, any criticism of the fact that the Catholic Church was the largest landholder of Hungary and it had a great impact on all levels of education, that was considered as a treason of the national court. At the same time, if Hungary wanted to proceed, the radical democratic Freemasons were arguing with a long-term progressive development. We cannot maintain this, European examples, we cannot preserve this influence of the Catholic Church. And this is connected, as I mentioned, also to the agrarian problem. It was argued by the radical democratic Masons who were considered to be identical with the majority of the Hungarian Freemasons, but they were not. Then they want to destroy the Hungarian big landed estates, which are the pillar of that society, because from a conservative side it was argued that the huge estates give a protective umbrella to the people who work there. The pillar, the Festetic, Esterházy, all the Batthyánys, all these big landlords are the major pillars of Hungarian culture, civilization, art. They are supporting the backbone, so to say, of the nation, and whoever is trying to weaken their economic potential is an enemy of the nation. So this is why these anti-Masonic accusations were so strong. Of course, one of the leading figures of this radical logist was Oscar Jassi, who analyzed in a more systematic and more scholarly way the problems of the day. And it's a consolation that in the longer run, and in not 30, 40 years, he turned out to be right. But because historical Hungary fell apart, because tragic events were taking place, but he at that time his views were not accepted, and to make him more a kind of a devil in the majority, even public opinion view today, he was a participant of the 1918 revolution in Hungary, and again in this collective memory, although the 1918 revolution filled in a vacuum the traditional type of politicians, whereas the 1919 Soviet Republic was exactly the opposite. It is not an organic part of Hungarian history, but it's the opposite. Completely new type of people enter the political life and want to impose a Soviet type of system of Hungary. There's a direct connection made between this radical democratic views and Freemasonic lodges as an institutional framework where they acted, and the communist dictatorship. It is also not considered to be an advantage, but a disadvantage that there were really attempts on behalf of some Freemasons. One of them, Zsigmond Kunti, was a leading social democrat, as peace feelers. So they were, during the latter phase of the First World War, they were trying to enter connections with the Freemasons in the Entente countries, without success, but even the very fact of having had contacts to the Entente countries is an evidence for Mr. Raffai and the like, that they were traitors, in fact, of the Hungarian national cause. And this is, of course, the typical picture which appears in every book concerning Freemasonry. Now, the prohibition, basically, of course, Eric is right as far as the prohibition is concerned, but it was not the continuation of the Soviet Republic prohibition, but it was banned because there was an overall legislation at the beginning of the Horthy regime that all the laws of the Soviet Republic were abolished, but that they repeatedly banned the activities of the Freemasons, but it has to be added that this prohibition was not taken so very seriously. So they could travel, there was a watching eye on them, but for example, when it came to for the Hungarian government in the 1920s was very important, the Kossuth monument was inaugurated in New York. Then there was a huge delegation of Hungarian politicians and members of the political and cultural elite, and the representatives of the Hungarian Freemasons were not only offered, was not only granted the possibility, but were offered the possibility to participate in that, because the Hungarian government of the time wanted to impress, so to say, the American public opinion. So this is the time of survival, and comes the 1945-50 period. Within an incredibly short time, in 5 years, Hungarian Freemasonry resurrected with mainly foreign help, and the Masonic House, which was inaugurated in 1896, exactly in the year when the great celebrations for the 1,000-year arrival of the Hungarian tribes in the Carpathian Basin was celebrated. So that was rebuilt with American Freemasonic help. And strange as it might be, the leader of the Hungarian Communist Party at that time, Mr. Rákosi, was willing to give a protective umbrella over the head of the Hungarian Freemasons, in spite of the fact that the formal activities of the Freemasons were banned in 1950, but not a single person ever, due to his Freemasonic activity, was persecuted during communist times, including the worst Stalinist period. The commonplace explanation for that is that Mr. Rákosi, the head of the Hungarian Communist Party, cooperated with a number of those people, not that a short period passed since the early 20th century, and in the early 20th century he was a member of the so-called Galileo Circle, which was a group of progressive-minded Hungarian students which were supported by Freemasons. And Rákosi was a very clever man. He was an extremely well-educated, very clever man, and he figured out no use of persecuting Masons, but it can be of some merit then for him later. And it was mainly the charity activity that could survive, especially then in the 1960s and 70s on. After because my time is out, so I have to finish. So after 1989, due to the fact that I could say at least 5, 6, 7 dozen earlier Freemasons somehow kept in touch with each other also during the 1960s and 70s. It was not so difficult to bring in the light again. First, the Hungarian Symbolic Grand Lodge was re-established as an association, because there a special law was passed in 1989 about association, but the formal activities then started in December with the help of the Austrian Grand Lodge. Unfortunately, or perhaps we shouldn't add anything, it's a fact that soon after the Hungarian Symbolic Grand Lodge started its work, the Grand Orient, a year later, also started its activities in Hungary, and the activities were running in a parallel way. So, in the resurrection of Hungarian Freemasonry, English, French, American Freemasons in the European NATO forces played a very, very important role. As far as the current situation is concerned, Hungary has 5 Grand Lodges that, of course, from the perspective of the Symbolic Grand Lodge, only the Symbolic Grand Lodge is
the major.
Regular. Only that is regular, but the others also exist and carry on their activities and have their home pages. There's the Grand Orient, and there is a mixed lodge, there is men and women, and there is also a women's lodge, and there is a special Scottish Rite lodge as well. But altogether, the number of people might mean about 400 to 600 members, out of which the Symbolic Grand Lodge, of which I belong to, might have 300, 350 members. On the whole, the big debate, both within the lodges and outside the lodges, when the topic comes up, is still the interpretation of how not to deal with politics, whether to what extent Freemasons should have a say about political issues, not on an everyday level, but in a broader context, because the constitution of the Symbolic Grand Lodge of Hungary was recently revised, and there was a big discussion whether the fundamental axiom of Freemasonic activities, that it has three pillars: philosophic, philanthropic, and progressive. There was no discussion about the first two, but there was a big discussion about the last one, progressive. Whether, under the present circumstances, progressive should be made part of the long-term aim. Ultimately, I was very much supporting this. Ultimately, the reference to progress remained part of it, but the discussions how to interpret progress in general and institutions and measures connected to progress is still a matter of discussion. This is why I picked this topic, and this is in the title of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As you just said, in order to be fair and correct, there was this conference, the first conference on Freemasons was organized by Eva Balaš, and actually in that collection of papers that she published, the Father, the Aufklärung, which of course relates to enlightenment, to the bearers of enlightenment in Central and East Europe. The first article, also scientific, scholarly, on the history of Serbian Freemasons was published by Strahinja Kostić. That was in 1979, so we should acknowledge that since that year at least scholarly research of Freemasonry in this region also starts, but we should be aware that this was very much focused on Enlightenment period, which of course is a bit different than when these national states emerged in the second half of the 19th century. So we will have discussion after the second panel because the coffee has already been served, and since we have this coffee habit which is very strong.
So it's actually 20 minutes break, and we start at quarter after 12 more or less. Thank you very much.